Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to Courageous Community Conversations, a partnership with Shaw University and the City of Raleigh. We're so happy that you're here this afternoon, and we're looking forward to a really engaging and exciting conversation. As you know, about a week ago, last Thursday, we had a conversation just really about issues of discrimination in Raleigh. And today we're going to talk about affordable housing and education. So we have two wonderful panelists with us today, and I'm going to introduce them to you. To my far left is Dr. Kimberly Mokhtarian. She is president of Save Our Sons, a 501c3 corporation, and CEO of SOS Consulting Group, a faith-based lobbying firm designed to engage agencies, legislatures, and stakeholders from a moral perspective. Dr. Mokhtarian is a seasoned advocate, highly regarded for her combination of creativity, strategic judgment, and courtroom prowess. She has broad experience advocating complex cases in both federal and state courts, involving life sentences to corporate responsibility. Dr. Mokhtarian has successfully advocated in Wake County courts for abused and neglected children for well over 15 years, as well as working with suspended and expelled youth. Her education extends from special needs children to exceptional children. She has taught in Wake County jails for over 7 years to both adults and juvenile population, and currently teaches world history and social studies to middle schoolers and elementaries. Dr. Mokhtarian holds a doctorate in biblical counseling and theology from Justice Fellowship International, a master's degree in public administration from Strayer University, and a bachelor's of applied sciences from Campbell University with a focus on criminal justice. Ms. Mokhtarian is known for her watchdog approach as it relates to ensuring the integrity of the law. To my immediate left is Dr. Charles Johnson. He is an assistant professor of history and director of the public history program at North Carolina Central University. Dr. Johnson is the principal investigator of a $148,000 American Council for Learned Societies digital extension grant, leading 3 institutions on research related to the slave deeds records. Dr. Johnson is an active scholar and public speaker. In 2016, he co-authored Topics in African Diaspora and History with Jim Harper, Tony Frazier, and Jarvis Hargrove. He has also published book chapters on the historical ties that bind African Americans and South Africans. He has given lectures on presentations on 3 continents, and on June 2021 gave a keynote address in African American history of Chatham County, North Carolina, for the country's 250th anniversary. He's currently the director of the public history program, and he takes pride in being born in the historic 3rd Ward of Durham in African American Lincoln Hospital, and educated in Durham Public Schools. He earned his Bachelor of Arts degree from Morehouse College in Atlanta, Georgia, his Master of Arts from North Carolina Central University, and his PhD from Howard University. Thank you all for being here, and we're very excited to have our conversation today. So to begin with, affordable housing and education were 2 of the most important topics related to the people who participated in the survey. So I would like for you all just to kind of give an opening statement on your perspective on these 2 vital topics. Dr. Johnson, you have your mask off, so you can go first.
All right, so first let me just say thank you, Dr. Moore. I'm honored to be here at Shaw University and to be on the campus of one of the first HBCUs in the South. So the questions that you raised as it relates to affordable housing and to education are acute in Durham and nationally. I see that these 2 problems relate to one another, and they are of long duration. So the challenges that we have faced in terms of effectively educating our young people spills over into not having the type of income that we would like to have in order to be able to support purchasing homes. Let me give you an example of what I'm talking about. In Durham, the median property value for a new home in Durham is about $253,000. So most African Americans are not in a place where they can afford, to purchase homes at that level. And when we have these types of problems, it destabilizes our communities. And as a consequence of having destabilized communities, the problem then sort of snowballs, and it becomes a problem that backs up, how can I say this? One problem, again, is backing up against the other. When I look at the kids that I'm privileged to educate at North Carolina Central University, many of those kids are first-time college students. And first-time college students are coming out of a situation where they have come out of households where oftentimes their parents did not have all of the means that they would have liked to have had, and those students are having to take on extra jobs and do extra work, which causes them more stress and more strain in what they're doing. And it's a situation that I think in order for us to really effectively address it, we have got to get on the ground in the community and talk to people in the community about the challenges that they're facing in terms of affordable housing. And we have also got to get the business community and government and these institutions where there's so much know-how in conversation with one another and out of silos to bring the people who have the problems closer to the people who have the power so that we can effectively bring about change. I want to also contextualize what I'm saying by saying that when we look at where African Americans are today, if you look at Marissa Baradarian's Black Banks and the Racial Wealth Gap, she says that African Americans at emancipation had about, and I'll end here, had about a little less than 0.5% of the wealth of the nation. I want you to think about that. Now, property could not own property, so we could understand that. But after 156 years, we're at a place now where African Americans still only have 1% of the wealth of the nation. So when you have that type of an acute economic wealth imbalance, it's going to take some very serious and committed, and I'd say almost revolutionary changes in the way that we are thinking and approaching these problems to really bring about and see any kind of real change.
Thank you. Dr. Mukhtarian?
Thank you, Dr. Moore, and the Shaw University family. Thank you for having me as a spokesperson on this panelist. What I would like to say is that being a native of Raleigh, North Carolina, and also a resident in many other parts of the country, the problem is the same. What we're seeing is not just a housing problem, but a hatred problem. This hatred has spilled over and caused the housing crisis. And the crime committed against the African American community overlaps in education, housing, mental health, incarceration, and many other areas by which we are seeing this onslaught of our economic value. What I would like to say is that there's a difference between education and information. We've been receiving education, but somehow some of the information has been hidden. Grants, opportunities in our communities that could give us the economic advantage. Those things have been hidden or not readily assessed by our people. And so today, I think what we need to address is how can we strategically begin to put the fragments of our people back together. Through isolation and segregation, they've made us go into a mode of survival. That survival has caused us not to help one another or to become disoriented when it comes to the issues in our community. And now we look up and we have a new word for the hatred called gentrification. We have new words called housing crisis. We have new words that talk about alternative learning for our children. We don't have a problem, we have an injustice. And I believe that when we begin to call it what it really is, we can come at it for what has happened to us over the years. And we can demand that those fragments be put back together. We have to tie our top back down to our bottom, and we have to create our own economic system by which we make sure those that are at the bottom, you don't have to have a lot of education. We're seeing millions of people come into this country every day without an education and make it. They're given jobs, they're given opportunities, with or without an application, with or without a resume, and they're sustaining their families. As our families are being broken, placed in foster care, and separated, we have to do a better job at protecting our own. We have to do a better job of informing our people from the least to the greatest. And then we'll see the economic value come back into the community that we once saw immediately after emancipation.
Thank you. Those are two very good statements. I really appreciate that. Before we continue, let's just talk a little bit about some housekeeping issues. I'm sorry that I didn't do that at the onset. So this is coming to you on Facebook Live as well as through Zoom. This is a conversation. Obviously, we would prefer if people could meet in person, but because of the rising numbers of COVID-19, we're just not able to do that. But we still want to hear from the community. We still want to hear your questions. We want to hear what it is that you have to say. So even though I have some questions up here for our panelists, it's really vital that you all participate and share with us what your concerns are. So within Zoom, if you sign up, you'll have access to it, and just please type your chat, and then our technical people will make sure that I get the questions so that we can ask the panelists. Okay? Thank you. All right. So one of the first things that I wanted to talk about, or that we've seen from some of our panelists in terms of the affordable housing, is kind of an issue with gentrification. Why is it that we're starting to have this situation where you have communities of color who for so long have not had resources, have not had access to certain things, and now all of a sudden you have other people who are moving into those communities, and now we're starting to have access to resources, we're starting to have grocery stores, we're starting to have nicer amenities. So why is that a problem here in Raleigh, and why is that like happening nationwide?
Well, I don't mind jumping in on that, Dr. Moore. I think, that speaks to the history of African Americans here in this country, right? So it is, a new form of Jim Crow.
Okay.
Right? It's a continuation of the exploitation of the lowest segment, the most vulnerable segment of our society. And historically, we have been in that role. And, as was indicated, we've almost normalized that condition, right? So we take the abnormal circumstance that we find ourselves in, that we have been forced into, and we've normalized that to a great extent. So if you go back to what and I think it's really important that people embrace this, right? So when I say that African Americans have 1% of the wealth, what that means is that service delivery in your community does not work like it does in other communities. Policing in your community is not going to work like it does in other communities, right? So what we see is that connection in between poverty and then poor education. The schools are not going to work in your community the way that they will in other communities when you have these, these problems. So at the heart of the matter, and it is a matter of the heart as I see it, we have got to convince our friends in the white community and those people who have means and power and influence in government and other places, and in business in particular, to partner with us, and again, to close the gap between those people who need support the most and those people who have power and influence to do that. But this is a matter of the heart, and it's very difficult. I will say this. You can write policy all day, but if people are not, if it is not in their heart to change or to follow that policy, they're not going to do that. You cannot effectively legislate against the sentiment. people are going to do what it's in their heart to do and what they believe, right? So some of this is, and that's what Martin Luther King was doing, right? He was aiming at people's hearts, and this is what he was trying to get people, to change. And as far as gentrification goes, I'll speak again in the Durham context, even though it's happening here in Wake County and in other places, as well. That is reflective of the fact that we don't have the means to, as the tax base rises, as whites move into our community, we ultimately are pushed out of them, even where we have had government in Durham intentionally on South Street, for example, try to build affordable housing for the black community. It ended up being a situation where you had whites who, by the way, are just taking advantage of what they see as an economic opportunity, move in, and they ended up in those houses and actually it did not have the desired or intended effect that the city was looking for. But to me, all of this is tied back to where we are economically. And again, it's going to take almost a revolutionary way of thinking about this. William Sandy Darity and his wife have talked about this ad nauseum. I'll stop there, but there's much more that could be said about that.
Okay, thank you. Dr. Mukhtarian?
So when we start to look at housing, we must look at who is crippled by the current system that has waged war on the black community. And we have to say, this is not coincidental. Every move made, every systematic change, every building, even the programs that are offered, if the people are not ready or mentally capable of even understanding what is available to them, then automatically they lose by default. And we have to understand that long before you offer opportunities, we have to address what has been done, the castrations of our communities, the lynchings out of our communities, the lynchings out of the economic value system, whereby blacks have never received their just due when it comes to economic stability. They've been ostracized, and they've also been managed, which is different from protected. And I believe from the early days of Reconstruction all the way up until now, we've seen a people who have fought relentlessly just to exist. And now I guess the chickens are coming home to roost. Why? Because we are now in a situation where the wealth gap is so large. You cannot make up. They're saying it will take another 900 years for us to even close that gap. Here in Raleigh, they're saying that our city is managing our numbers off of 80% AMI here, where the average African-American family is well below those means. So at this point in time, while we are one of the first, amongst the first cities that the nation is saying everyone wants to live in, African-Americans are barely able to even stand on the corner. The houses downtown have transitioned from $60,000 to $500,000. I remember the time when my grandparents would go to the north side of Raleigh and clean houses, and some of them could not even go into certain parts of the houses to eat because they were considered maids. Well, those same plantation-style homes are now being built downtown Raleigh. Two-story homes that look like Georgia, Savannah, Georgia homes with their dogs and things that still resemble the Old South. It's just another generation. And the sad part is that our children, with all the education that we're providing, still don't know what they're fighting or what they're up against. It tells us if we've been indoctrinated or if we've been educated. And again, we have to come to a consistency that this system does not work for us. And we have to demand, not ask, what is rightfully ours, and have it protected. Because if not, it will arrive back into the hands of those that we've taken it from. And we're not asking for what is not rightfully ours. We're demanding what has been taken all along. So to start talking about homelessness and placing people in hotels and crime and violence, you have to talk about the injustice of America. You have to talk about racism at its finest. And again, as we watch legislation try to gag order through the CRT theory, that we can't even discuss racism in our schools and the effects of racism. We are in a very dangerous place, and we cannot ignore it any longer.
Thank you. We're getting some questions in from our audience, and here's a question from Mr. Hodgkins. About gentrification, some metropolitan areas have expanded the use of Section 8 vouchers and low-income tax credits to enable long-term residents to afford to stay in their communities. Therefore, you have more wealth, drives better schools, better access to groceries, pharmacies, etc. Can that be done here in the city of Raleigh? Dr. Mokhtarian, I'm going to start with you first.
Well, absolutely. Back in 2011, there was a candidate who actually pushed for the city of Raleigh to have Section 8 vouchers revisited. As you well know, that there's a limited time that you can hold on to a voucher before it expires. And we simply do not have the landlordship in Raleigh to sponsor those who would need it. Most of the Section 8 lists are on backlog, sometimes up to 3 years, at over 1,000 people. And the numbers are still growing. With the eviction rate now another issue, that same list will increase at record numbers. But we can drive. That is HUD, CFR. There's a CFR code that is with HUD that says that Section 8 voucher holders can access wealth through purchasing a home with their voucher. Not much of that is mentioned, not much of that is advertised to turn the tide when it comes to home ownership, wealth, economic disparities. Home ownership is one of the ways that blacks can access the wealth and drive this market back. And the fact that the city is not sponsoring, advertising, or even promoting that as an issue, but would choose to tell you that they've spent $100,000 on keeping people in hotels. Or the Raleigh Rescue Mission, where they spend almost $3,000 for a family to live in the Raleigh Rescue Mission, the shelter, but won't give that same incentive of $3,000 to a down payment on a home. We have our priorities mixed up, people. And I do address, again, the housing authorities. We have to go to the next level. If the city will not abide by the rules that cause our economic advancement, we must go to the federal level. Thank you.
I wanted to follow up on what you just said. You said the landlords are not sponsoring people with Section 8. Is that their choice? They have that choice to do that as private owners, or is that something that should be legislated by the city? Because if it's happening in other places, what can be done to I don't know, force or make landlords, offer this?
Here we are again. We're back at the same issue, home ownership. In order for a person to rent from Section 8, the landlord has to agree to allow their property to be rented by Section 8 voucher holder. And what we're finding is that most of the landlords are white, and they do not trust in that system, nor do they want to be accountable for allowing their properties to be rented out by African Americans. So if a white person doesn't sponsor, then we don't have that opportunity. Again, that opportunity for African Americans to own and lease or rent to other African Americans is very few and far between. We still have a housing issue, people. And until we address the fact that we are well over 100 years behind in that wealth gap, we're going to continue to see this thing fall.
Dr. Johnson, is there anything you'd like to add?
No, I think that was effectively addressed. All I will say is that, we can be as creative as we are willing to be in terms of how we are addressing these problems, right? And that there are all sorts of possible solutions if people have the heart to make those changes.
Can I also add, Dr. Moore, that with Section 8 vouchers, you only have approximately 60 to 90 days to utilize that voucher before it expires. So if you don't find a homeowner who will sponsor you, then your voucher will expire and you will have to reapply all over again and be on the waiting list to receive assistance.
Now, that's just when we talk about, what's the word I want to use? When people say, oh, racism doesn't exist, but when we look at policy and the implementation of policy, that's a very key. Why does it have to expire after 90 days? If you get a housing voucher, why can't you keep it for a year? These are just systems and things that are put in place to block people from moving ahead and moving forward. So I just wanted to add that.
Yes, and you're well said. Actually, in New York, Donald Trump actually pushed an order to remove all Hispanics that were undocumented from New York Housing Authority, and they gave them up to 6 months to move.
Yeah.
So there are so many different policies that are that have many disparities. So.
Okay. All right. We have a couple more questions. What is it that we need to see from the Raleigh City Council and the mayor with regards to affordable housing when it comes to centering Black and brown communities that are not able to afford the rapidly rising cost of living? And that kind of gets to the heart of this whole conversation. What is it that the city, the mayor, the city council, what is it that has to be done in order for these things to be addressed?
Well, I'll just say again, this is, I'm coming from a Durham context, but I think it applies here. And I think that you have to get people out of silos and in conversation with the people who are most impacted and affected by the issues that arise out of affordable housing. So that means, getting out of council chambers and having people come before you and into the communities where you can see for yourself and have conversations with community leaders and members of the community about what's going on and about the changes that you would like to see take place and why. And then, again, to really listen to those and to have a heart to make changes as necessary. I just think that's a first step. And then use that position that you have, that you've been elected to as a public servant, to call upon the business community, right? And the state and whoever else is necessary to come to the table so that we can have all hands on deck in addressing the issues that are so acute and of such a long duration as it relates to, to housing and education. And again, these things overlap. Hearing, people being evicted, when that happens to kids, that puts them behind in school, and then, it becomes, again, it spirals.
Dr. Mokhtarian?
I think the city of Raleigh is long overdue for having an honest conversation about not just the monies that are needed to build effective housing, but partnering with the people to give the power back to the community. I think as we look at the census, we just took a census, funds were allocated for each person named in the United States of America. That fund needs to be allocated towards affordable housing and any other issue that African Americans have. I think we need a different say or stake at the table by which we allocate the funds to our issues. While there are many people who are now coming to this country and funds are having to be generated to accommodate, I think it's long overdue for us to have what is necessary, those funds, to bring about the change that we need in our communities. And go back and pull our communities together. Those who 200 years ago would have been your top workers are now incarcerated, absolutely doing nothing. They're not a part of the labor, and the least and the minimum that you see them do is not running construction, but picking up trash. These are 25 and 30-year-old men who could be building your housing, building a legacy, raising that 30% to 50%. We don't have to ask for 30%. We can be much more if we brought our communities back and not allow this cracked system to continue to beat us until we're broken. We have to have all hands on deck and talk about solutions. What is owed so we can decide what is going to be administrated.
Thank you. All right, we have another question from Ms. Bisbee, and I'm going to direct it to you, Dr. Johnson. It's a rather long question, but she's basically saying in Orange County, they implemented what they called inclusionary zoning ordinance. So she's arguing that an inclusionary zoning can really help with the gentrification. Let me see if I can read a little bit of it. They implemented an inclusionary zoning ordinance rendering State Bill 426 as a non-starter. On the subject of inclusionary zoning, ultimately in Orange County, it increased the housing costs and led to an overall decrease in African American presence. I'm sorry. So she believes the proximity of RTP, the hospitals, is really affecting the issue. So I'm sorry I read that wrong. It's gentrification, not inclusionary zoning. How can we come together and build an argument and the need for inclusionary zoning? So I guess she's saying in Orange County, they created a zoning ordinance where at least they're leaving it in terms of affordable housing versus allowing other companies and other businesses to come in. I'm not sure, do you know anything about that you can maybe address?
No, I can't speak to that specifically, so I'm not even going to attempt to. But what I can say, again, is that you have got to get in conversation those people who are in the communities that are being impacted with the people who have influence and power, right, to work out whatever the desired outcome is of those people who are being most negatively impacted by, what's going on there. So, what that looks like is what the previous question to me, and that's getting your county commissioners, getting your city council people to come out and to have conversations, to sit down in the community really and to talk about the challenges that you're facing and the way to go about the best way that you all can come to an agreement that works best for the community, in solving these problems. But that particular question, I can't really speak to that because that's not my expertise. Yeah.
Okay, but I have a follow-up question,
Sure.
and that is for both of you.
Good.
What if they don't want to meet with the community? Ms. Mokhtarian has been talking about issues confronting the black community in Raleigh for years. Dr. Johnson, you've told me of situations in Durham and other areas where decisions are made behind closed doors, and by the time community has found out about it, the decision has already been made. The concrete is being poured. The scaffolding is going up. So what can the community do if the politicians are making these decisions behind closed doors, if they're having meetings, if they're sitting down with lobbyists, but they refuse to meet with the community about their issues? What recourse does the community have? I mean, do we have to protest in order to be heard?
Absolutely. You already know the answer to that, right? So we have got to be organized ourselves. And in Durham, for example, we have many, political and social and community organizations that are doing work. The Durham Committee on the Affairs of Black People is just one of them. It was founded in 1935. Really to be able to effectively address the different areas of black life, not just in politics, but in health, in economics, and in religion, and in education, and all these other areas. I don't see why we couldn't have something here in Raleigh. In fact, when it was first established, the idea was to have that type of community-based organization all over the state of North Carolina for all of the different African American communities so that we could speak our truth to power. And but I think organizing is really, really important in that. I think we are in a period, Dr. Moore, where people are willing to listen. And I think there are people in the community, there are white folks in the community who are keen to hear, what the concerns are from the black community. And you can create a coalition of support to talk about, the issues that we have and force our politicians to be accountable. But I want to add that it's not just the politicians, right? It's not just the politicians. It goes so far, beyond that. When we're talking about economic issues, we have got to bring into conversation those people who actually have the economic influence out of the RTP, right? Who have benefited so much from being here. We have Google and Apple who are coming here. Both of them already have social equity programs and platforms that they're working with that our people in our communities should be able to access, and also to push our politicians, to help build those bridges as well. But there's got to be a heart to do what needs to be done. I'd like to think that the politicians here in Raleigh would be willing to come out to the black community and other communities and the brown communities and others to talk to people about the very real issues that they have. That's, as I see it, part of their responsibility as sworn servants of this great city.
Exactly. Dr. Mokhtarian?
Well, I think I'm just going to go back to the old-fashioned way that Dr. Martin Luther King and many of the other righteous walkers did, and they simply boycotted this system. If you don't get the service that you deserve after paying taxes, you stop payment. And we've asked for the defunding of the police, but the police don't belong to us. The police belongs to them. We're asking them to stop payment on their stuff. We can't control them, but we can stop our payment. When are we going to remove our funds? When are we going to stop circulating our dollars to systems that do not work? Last year, George Floyd riot caused the entire world to wake up. In particular, Fayetteville, North Carolina, the slave market house, a young man tried to burn it down. The federal government picked him up and charged him with 30 months in the feds because the slave market receives federal dollars. Those federal dollars are our dollars. Are we not financing the slave market house? Are we not financing our own abuse? A block away from here, in historic Oakwood, it's the Mordecai House. It's also President Andrew Johnson, who stopped Reconstruction and our advancement on economic influence. Yet our federal dollars pay for his empty house, while many of our own African Americans do not have a place to live. We have to stop being so passive, aggressive to these issues. And when they evicted our people by the thousands, those who had mortgages should have just stopped payment. We are not separate. You can't separate us by classism. And that's what has happened. The bourgeoisies have forgotten about the low income, and it's created a wealth gap. And so we have abolished our own communities because we've allowed ourselves to tell ourselves we've arrived and they have not. Until we go back to being one, like I said, back in the days of the civil rights movement, we saw many different faces of classes of African Americans. The farmer who was affected, the janitor who was affected, the sanitation worker who was affected, the African American preachers, and also the lawyers. We are calling our communities back as one. And that's where we have to start. If they don't talk to us, we will talk amongst ourselves. And we will get it right, because at this point, we have no choice.
I absolutely agree with that. I just want to say amen. I think, the first conversations we have to be amongst ourselves, because again, we have to be organized, right, and in solidarity with one another, and the issues that
Tarians.
Dr. McTarian has just pointed up are really apropos, right, in the black community. There are many housekeeping things that we need to take care of also that get in the way. And we really are at a point as a people where we can't afford to have that. We really have got to, to come together and work together, right? And then we have to be willing to do whatever it takes to push to get the change that we want to see. So if it's boycotting, if it's being in the street, if it's voting out people who are not supporting us, as we should be doing anyway, then we need to be doing all these things and whatever else it takes.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
All right, we only have about 20 minutes left. I knew that housing was going to be a very dynamic conversation. Let's see if we can transition a little bit to education. I know that each of you are educators in your own right. One of the things that people really talked about in the survey is really this lack of understanding of why our schools are so unequal. Raleigh's tax base is obviously growing because of new industry, new businesses, new residents here. So we have new condominiums, so people pay more money, increasing the tax base. We have Research Triangle Park, et cetera, et cetera. So with the influx of more money, why can't funds be distributed equally throughout the school system so that all children have access to just some of the basic things that they need? What is the cause of this persistence and unequal education? Dr. Johnson, I'm going to see if you can start with that one.
Well, the first observation, again, is that we're not coming out of like households or like backgrounds to begin with. And I think we need to understand that, right? So you can't take a problem that is racially based and then trying to fix it with race-neutral solutions. So okay. That's a real problem that we have, right? So in Durham, we effectively have Jim Crowed our education system somehow, so that we have black and brown kids in class with white kids, but are performing at a much, much lower level. I mean, we are literally effectively failing our young people. Mm-hmm. And we are not preparing them to be successful, to be able to really live before they die, and to enjoy what it means to be a full citizen of our society based upon their attainments and so forth through school. But understand that we're coming out of already different types of backgrounds. Now, when you add the whole layer of who's educating our children and what types of policies have we put in place that handcuff our young people, right? So every year I have friends and colleagues who are educating in the secondary school system. And every year they come and say, man, the kids that are coming, based upon where we are and what we've gone through, they're going to have some real challenges when they get to you. And every year, it's like they feel like it is getting worse and worse instead of better and better. And we see that, as I'm sure that you do at Shaw University, in dealing with, in working with our kids, where they are academically. And what has happened is we have done things that make literally no sense in the education system, right? It, to me, should be almost a requirement that if you don't like black people, you should not be teaching black children. I don't care where you are, whether you are in the public school system, a private school, at college, or whatever, that we don't have place for that, right? And we have all of these people who have, I think, oftentimes internalized, sometimes not even recognized that they've internalized, stereotypical ideas about who African Americans are, what our issues are. And we know this when we look at the polls that they take for Americans, many Americans think that African Americans are doing well. And the reality is that we absolutely are not. So we have all of these challenges that arise from, you're talking about affordable housing and coming out of communities that are not stable, coming out of communities where we're first generation students and all of these kinds of challenges. We're having to work while we go to school. We have all the toxicity of white supremacy that we're dealing with. Mm-hmm. And at the same time, you think that we're going to step up and perform like other kids are performing without making allowance for the understanding that we have all this extra baggage and all this that we're having to deal with. I shouldn't say baggage, challenges that we're having to deal with. So it is a problem, though, that if we are willing to face the reality of where we are and look at where students are performing now, and instead of, to me, trying to do patchwork, literally rethink. Let me give you an example. In Durham, they have a group called, an organization called Student U. And to me, what they have done is in the secondary school system, they've taken the HBCU approach, right? So in our institutions, in the HBCU setting, the reason that we've had so much success historically, the reason there's so many outstanding Shaw alumni is because this is a caring and nurturing environment that comes to the level of the student and centers the experiences of the student, and then recognizing that does what's necessary to get them to where they need to be successful. I don't see any reason why we could not do that in our secondary school system if we had, again, the heart to do it.
Dr. Mokhtarian, as a teacher?
Well,
what is it you're saying?
Let me say from a teacher, but also a parent. I think the position of teaching or education it doesn't start at the school. It starts in the home. And it starts in your basic community. And when you see that whatever is being taught does not produce a healthy community after 12 years, after 14 years, after 20 years, if all the doctors that you educate in the African American community don't come back and build successful places of business. And when we say the business sector, it means the white business sector. Or developers, it don't mean black developers because we don't have many. Whatever profession we're talking about does not equate to our own coming back, then we've already lost the battle. Whatever we're being taught and whatever we teach has to have a centralized location of unity. It has to have a foundation that says you are enough. That our children do not have to go outside to receive anything. And what happens is we are building a second-class citizen in our children today by making them think that this education is the primary one. So with all the student loans, with all the monies, with all of the money circulating, does the education that we're actually producing produce healthy communities? Does it produce protection? Does the criminal justice programs at our schools produce protection from bad cops? We're spending our money, we're spending tuition, and we're still not protected. We're spending our money, we spend it in institutions, and we still don't have economic growth. We're building all over our cities, yet none of the developers are ours. The buildings don't have our architect. The streets don't have our names. What are we producing? Are we questioning what this curriculum and how these curriculums abide by us? And are we actually tied, or are we going through the motions? I think we have to have, again, a come to Jesus meeting right in our own households. And I'm not just talking about at your residence. I'm talking about amongst us. As a people. Is this what we want to look like in the next 5 to 10 years? Because I can't tell you with the quick growing and fast-paced gentrification that we'll have that much time.
Wow. To piggyback on what you all were saying, because I always have a question ready, but then you all say something enlightening that I want to follow up on. In terms of the curricula, because that's really been an issue. I've done consulting work and curricula development, particularly from the point of view and perspective of African American studies. And as well, other communities, Latino studies and Asian studies, all of these communities feel that their perspectives should be included in the classroom. Is there anything that citizens can do to challenge the school board and to challenge the curricula so that it becomes more inclusive? What can be done, because sometimes they make contracts with book publishers, what can be done from the perspective of the citizens to challenge and have the curricula be more inclusive, if anything at all? Dr. Johnson?
Well, I think, it's like this whole, we've talked about this offline, like, I think oftentimes white people are quite candidly speaking, afraid of what will be found out, or afraid that somehow they're going to lose privilege if we start having conversations about, black and brown and other experiences. And it's that could not happen because we represent within the nation anyway. We're a global majority, but within the nation, we represent still, financially, we don't have the influence and power. But there's power that does come out of knowing who you are and understanding the experiences of people, and that's why teaching about African and African American and Latinx and Asian, history is so important. In addition to the history that we're already teaching about, about whites, which is taken again to be, being white is taken to be normative in this society, right? Which means that everyone who's not is somehow outside of the norm, and we're scratching and clawing to affirm our humanity, right? You see all of the signs that say Black Lives Matter out in front of houses and all of that. It's instructive. But we have to have open and honest conversations, and this nation has not had one as it relates to the experiences of different peoples. And talking specifically about African Americans, we still have not had an open and honest conversation about slavery and its meaning. Mm-hmm. We still have not had an open and honest conversation about convict leasing, right? And then the new Jim Crow and mass incarceration. Instead, we try to ignore those and see somehow as they're actually propping up, white privilege. But the reality is, for whites, they are themselves trapped in a situation where, the vast majority of them the vast majority of the wealth of the nation is in the hands of a small number of folks, right? And that's how we're all disciplined by that. And they've got to come to the reality that if we're all going to be able to live out our lives in a way that is truly rewarding everyone, then we've got to work together to find ways to get some of the wealth that has been taken that could be used to that end, to get that back. And we come to that understanding, Dr. Moore, we come to that understanding through the study of all of these different experiences that people are having, not just here, but elsewhere also. And for time, I'll stop there.
Okay. Ms. Mukhtarian, do you have anything that you'd like to add to that?
Well, I think it's important that we understand the power of our own value. Mm-hmm. I think about us and our historic accolades, that we are the original people. We are not just the original people, but we made things originally. And it is from our astrology and our mathematics and all of the wonderful contributions to the world by which we are now what they call civilized, that has to come back to the forefront as to who we are. We did not start in slavery, nor were our ancestors slaves, but they were enslaved, which is totally different. We did not come here by choice. We came here unwillingly, and we've been fighting ever since. I think that our children have, and not just black children, but all children have a duty that to know that there is only one pattern for man, and we are the original pattern. And from there, we're not second class to anyone. We've just been disenfranchised. And so once we go back to allowing unapologetically our children to understand that's their birthright, then we can stop apologizing and actually asking for something that's already ours. We don't need them to give us education because we are the educators. We were the original educators. And we should be creating our own curriculums. And it should be inclusive. Why? Because all nations, all colors come out of the original man. And today, I, again, come against any kind of false narrative that have been presented over the last 400 years throughout this global world so that we can actually get it right. And we don't have to apologize for someone else's mental illness or fear or sociopathic behaviors and hidden under law because you don't want to accept the truth. This is education. Our children shouldn't have to cover up who they are. They shouldn't have to buy a lot of clothes, shoes, gold teeth. We came from gold. We came from the places that are historically known for its wealth. We are wealth. And if that is not our message, then anything that is a stolen narrative. Thank you.
Thank you.
One last little, I want to add
We only
to
have
that.
a few more minutes.
It'd be one, this would be real
Okay,
quick.
thank
and,
you.
And that's just simply that, I think it was Steve Jobs, in talking about curricula, Steve Jobs said the most powerful person is the person that controls the narrative.
That's right.
So that's why that's so super important.
Absolutely. Thank you. We only have about 3 minutes left. I have one question. They were talking about the General Assembly has not properly funded education in the state of North Carolina with the Leandro case. And you all spoke to some of the issues of a non-responsive government from the city as well as the state. Do you think that federal oversight is necessary to address these issues in terms of if we're going to make housing affordable with Section 8 vouchers, if we're going to have equal access to the federal funds? What's your thoughts on that in terms of if the state and the local governments aren't going to be responsive to us, what do we need the federal government to come in and step in? Is it viable? Is it option?
I would say absolutely. It was the federal government who came in and assisted Juneteenth in Galveston, Texas. If it wasn't for the federal government passing laws and those laws protecting us, I don't think at this point we would be as far, if there's a such thing, as far as we have come. But we cannot depend on state oversight. There has to be a higher objective. And if they don't, I think we should also pose international oversight. That is the place where Malcolm X and many of the our forerunners began to have discussions. If the American government will not give us our just due, we must go a step further.
Okay. Dr. Johnson?
I don't have anything to add to that. That was so well said.
Okay. All right. Well, we only have about 2 minutes left. If there's one more final thing you all would like to say, maybe about a minute left, regarding housing and unequal education, I guess the last thing we need to say is, because this is for what the city of Raleigh is trying to implement, what is it that the city can do to really address these issues?
I'll go first and be very quick. So I'm glad you said that the exact way you did. So when we look at city council and city government, and one of the things that they can do is they can model themselves after other cities and what they've done. There's so much development that's taking place here in Raleigh. There's no reason that African Americans cannot get a significant portion of what's coming out of that development in terms of contracts for service or contracts for business. If you look at the experience of Atlanta and what Maynard Jackson was able to do there, for example, in empowering African American business owners in that space, there's no reason that we can't see that kind of development here. We just have to be intentional about going about doing that, because there's so much development. I would love to see that is another way that would help us to grow our wealth, right?
Okay. And Dr. Mokhtar, you'll have the last word.
Well, I also concur. I believe that once we begin to start moving our dollars together, start being focused and strategic on what is needed in our communities, then I believe we can begin to turn the tide on the economic shift that we need in order for our people to move from survival to uphill economic, achievements.
Okay. Thank you all very much. The hour has drawn near. It is 2 o'clock, a little after 2 o'clock in the afternoon, and I thank all of you for participating and submitting questions. Our next Courageous Community Conversations will be September 9th, 7 p.m. Currently, we're still scheduled to go to the City of Raleigh Museum at 7 p.m., but we'll see how everything goes with COVID. The topics for that conversation will be access to transportation as well as affordable jobs, that people need to have access to transportation so they can have access to economic opportunity. So, and then our last community courageous conversation will be September 18th, 1 p.m. The topic will be policing and mental health. So please stay tuned and join us for those conversations, and have a wonderful afternoon. Thank you very much.